Can you still get rich by investing in Bitcoin? Will holding just one Bitcoin make you a millionaire in the future? Today, I'll cover why I truly believe Bitcoin can reach $1 million per coin. I'll cover when I think it will happen, and I will explain what will cause it to happen. This video won't be one of those vague predictions based on grandiose promises. Instead, I will dissect the real data based on the buying demand coming in the next decade in order to calculate the true potential of Bitcoin's price growth. Welcome back to the VirtualBacon channel. My name is Dennis. I'm a crypto angel investor for the past 6 years, and I have invested in over 100 crypto startups. On this channel, I share views on market trends and investing strategy to build wealth in crypto. So how much money do you need to invest in Bitcoin to make $1 million? My target for this cycle is for Bitcoin to hit $200,000 in the next 1 to 2 years. This means you won't make $1 million even if you have one whole Bitcoin. You can check my full analysis with my price prediction and my investing plan in these two videos made back in 2023. Of course, you can take on more risk and play the altcoin market. However, you must know that the bull and bear markets are highly cyclical. The exponential gains in altcoins also lead to 80 to 90% crashes in the bear market. Popular altcoins can have 10 or even 100x growth on top of Bitcoin's growth, but they still have similar drawdowns more than 95%. In addition, I have real doubts on the future of altcoin investing as they might not exist anymore after real regulations come in place over the next 2 years. But we will save this for another video. In order to truly keep your wealth, you need to differentiate the time frames of investing. I do not plan to hold altcoins beyond the next 1 to 2 years. Instead, I only plan to hold Bitcoin over the long term for a 10-year plus time frame. Let me show you the real big picture. Why is Bitcoin still worth holding over the long term? I believe Bitcoin is the most likely asset to have 5 to 10x gains over the next decade compared to all other asset classes in the same caliber. Comparing Bitcoin to ETFs, individual stocks, other commodities like gold or silver, real estate, or whatever else, the chance of Bitcoin going from $200,000 to $1 million in the next 10 years is much higher than any other asset class. So I'll give you my full reason on this, and it's not just Bitcoin should reach $1 million. Let's look at some real data and the math behind it. Why do so many smart people say Bitcoin can reach $1 million in the next 10 years? To get this point, we have to understand that Bitcoin's addressable market is completely different from the rest of crypto. Bitcoin's core utility lies in its store of value. This means it keeps attracting buying demand as long as the value of cash keeps getting inflated away and the total wealth in the world keeps growing. Other store of value assets have similar characteristics like gold, real estate, or even ETFs, although they fluctuate. You can't say the same for technology-driven assets like other cryptos. People often refer to Bitcoin as the 21st century's digital gold, and therefore it should have a similar market cap to that of gold. While this is a good narrative, it goes way deeper than that. While I was researching for this video, our team actually proposed this question to me. Why does the market cap of Bitcoin just have to reach the market cap of gold? Where does the actual buying demand come from? Is it going to be from retirement funds, sovereign wealth funds, central banks, rich entities, asset managers, rich billionaires, or corporate treasuries? Who is going to go all in on Bitcoin to trigger the mass adoption? This question was super interesting for me to think about because I believe it's not any single type of investor going deep into Bitcoin. Rather, it's all of the above. Let me first show you some examples of Bitcoin adoption as a store of value from different types of rich entities, and then I'll give you the reason why I think this is happening and will only expand. So first, of course, we have BlackRock and the Wall Street ETFs continuing to increase their Bitcoin holdings. You can actively track the Bitcoin ETF inflows, and just last Friday, we saw the largest inflow of over $1 billion going into the Bitcoin ETFs. This represents the first type, which is asset managers. Then we have the corporate treasuries. This has led to some of the largest corporations in the world considering adding Bitcoin to its reserve holdings. We have none other than Microsoft, which will be voting for a potential investment of its treasury into Bitcoin in its next board meeting on December 10th. And you can see this exactly in the filing, assessment of investing in Bitcoin. Next, we have central banks and national reserves. So we all know there's the hype of the Bitcoin strategic reserve coming as a bill in the US. I think this will take many years to pass. However, we already see a lot of move around this. And even today, already a large list of countries hold Bitcoin in their reserves. They didn't have to purchase these Bitcoins. Instead, it came from seizures where they had criminal crackdowns. The fact that the US, China, and UK, none of these large countries sold their Bitcoin holdings that they have received from crackdowns many years ago means that they know the value of having Bitcoin in their treasury. In the US bill for the strategic Bitcoin reserve, they plan to acquire as much as 200,000 Bitcoin annually, which adds up to over 1 million BTC over a 5-year period. This might sound like a lot, but when you compare this number to how much gold reserves that the US Treasury holds, this is actually much smaller. The US holds the largest national treasury of gold, coming in at 8.1 thousand tons. At today's value of $86 million per ton of gold, this means the US has over $700 billion of their treasury allocated to gold. Now, if the US is to buy up 1 million Bitcoins over the next 5 years, at today's price, that is only $80 billion. Even if Bitcoin reaches $200,000, that is still only $200 billion of holdings in Bitcoin. That's not even 1/3 of the US Treasury's holdings sites in gold. Last but not least, just consider how many more rich billionaires, individual wealth fund managers, such as Ray Dalio, how many of them will need to consider to have an asset that is able to beat inflation, that is globally portable, anti-censorship and anti-sanction, and to have the asset be uncorrelated with everything else, even with gold. This is why we are starting to see more and more wealthy entities holding a portfolio consisting of even just a small percentage of their total value in Bitcoin. I did a video reacting to popular crypto TikToks recently, and you know those videos where you have the guy going up to people that have popular sports cars and they ask the person, what's your favorite crypto? Is it Bitcoin? Is it Ethereum? You notice something different when you ask the rich people versus the random interviews on the street. Out of every single person you ask with a popular sports car, no matter what their real stance is and how much they want to allocate their portfolio to Bitcoin, they all know what Bitcoin is, and they all recognize the importance of having even just 1% of their portfolio in Bitcoin. This goes across the board, across the globe. Any actual rich person with over 8 figures of wealth, you ask them what Bitcoin is, they can tell you what Bitcoin is. And they can explain exactly like how I explained it, why you need at least to consider Bitcoin as part of your portfolio. I also reacted to the video Da Vinci Jeremy made back in 2013, and a lot of people gave him credit for calling for Bitcoin early, for people to buy Bitcoin when it was under $10 or $100, whatever. So you see most of the comments below saying that, oh, this guy is rich now. He made people rich until today's price when Bitcoin is at 80K. But I think a lot of people miss the real vision he had over the long term. In this video, he didn't give people random price predictions saying Bitcoin can reach 10,000 or whatever amount of value over the next 5 years. Instead, what he said was, even if you just buy 0.1 Bitcoin, that is going to be a significant amount of money if you just wait long enough. And I agree with him perfectly here. Even if you just bought 0.1 Bitcoin even today, at some point over the next 10 years, that is still going to be worth at least 6 figures for you just passively. That is the true vision that he had in the way he formed this video over 10 years ago. And it's why I respect him a lot for making this early call. Okay, so we know every rich person and every rich entity will likely allocate a percentage of their portfolio into Bitcoin. But a lot of people don't think this is enough. They really underestimate the effect this will have. We don't need a single entity to go all in into Bitcoin for Bitcoin's price to go to $1 million. Let me break down the real math here. Here is the total amount of wealth in the world as calculated by the end of 2022, and we come in at $450 trillion. How much of the total wealth of the world is allocated to gold and to Bitcoin? Well, we know the market cap of gold, which is $18 trillion, and we know the market cap of Bitcoin at $1.5 trillion. So then let's do the math. We have 18 trillion divided by 454 trillion. That gives us 3.9% of the total wealth in the world that's allocated to gold. And similarly, we take 1.6 trillion of Bitcoin's market cap. We see the current allocation of the total wealth in the world into Bitcoin is only at 0.35%. This is a much more intuitive way to think about the gap between Bitcoin and the gold. It's not that Bitcoin needs to reach the market cap of gold. Rather, it's how much of the total portfolio on average from a wealthy entity do they need to allocate to Bitcoin versus gold. And right now, there is a huge imbalance. People on average allocate 10x more to gold versus into Bitcoin. And this ratio will change drastically over the next 10 years. Let's look at a projection of the total wealth in the world over the next 10 years, how much that can grow, and conversely, how much total allocation into Bitcoin can we expect. And let's take the most conservative approach. Here we have the total global wealth numbers as calculated by Credit Suisse in 2014. We see that 2 decades ago in 2004, the total global wealth in the world is about $160 trillion. And in the decade after, by 2014, that number grew to $255 trillion. This gives us a 1.6x growth in the total global wealth from 2004 to 2014. And then let's look at the last decade. Let's just take a conservative number 2 years ago with $454 trillion of total wealth, and let's divide that number by the total wealth we know from 2014. That gives us 1.75x growth of total wealth in the world over the last decade. So it's safe to say over the next decade until 2034, we will have at least about 1.65x growth over the total wealth in the world. So again, let's take $454 trillion of total wealth, times it by 1.65x. That gives us $750 trillion of total wealth in the world by 2034. Okay, so we know the total number. How much of this number will necessarily be allocated to that of Bitcoin? The decades from 2004 to 2014 is very significant because in 2004, the main event of that year is the launch of the gold ETF from BlackRock. This happened in November 2004. And in the decade following, the price of gold rallied from $420 all the way to $1,900. The total supply of all gold that has ever been mined in the world is about 200,000 tons. This is where you can calculate the total market cap of gold. And in each ton, we have 32,000 ounces. So you take 200,000 tons, times it by 32,000 ounces, and then times it by 420. So you have the starting market cap of gold coming in at $2.68 trillion when the gold ETF was created in 2004. We take this number and we can divide it by the total wealth in the world in 2004, which is $160 trillion. That gives us 1.68% of the total wealth in the world that's allocated to gold in 2004, right after the ETF launch. Okay, so then we know the percentage allocation on average of each wealthy portfolio into gold in 2004 was 1.68%. How much did that allocation grow over the coming decade? Again, let's do the same calculation 10 years after. So let's take total supply of gold in ounces, times it by the price of gold in 2014, which is $1,900. That gives us $12 trillion of market cap in gold by 2014. We take the total market cap of gold of 12.1 trillion divided by the total wealth in the world in 2014 at 255 trillion. That gives us 4.7% of the total wealth in the world that's allocated to gold. I cleaned up the numbers a bit, and here you go. Here is the real growth of the average portfolio allocation in gold in the decade after it got its ETF approved. So in 2004, the total amount of wealth in the world that's allocated to Bitcoin is at 1.67%. In the decade after, that number went up nearly 3x to 4.74%. Remember, this is for gold, the asset that has existed thousands of years already, and with its narrative being the default store of value also being proven over thousands of years. Even with such a long history, after the ETF came in and the Wall Street really started to embrace it as the true store of value, its average portfolio allocation went up nearly 3x. Now imagine the same kind of effect, how reflexive that will be on the price of Bitcoin and the average portfolio allocation into Bitcoin. Let's just take this 3x increase in the average portfolio allocation that we saw in gold and apply that to Bitcoin and see where we get. So let's work backwards. Today, the total market cap of Bitcoin is about $1.6 trillion. You divide that by the total wealth in the world, which is $454 trillion, give or take, probably a little bit more. That gives us 0.35% of the total wealth in the world that's allocated to Bitcoin. Remember from earlier, we had a projection for the total wealth growth in the world over the next decade to reach $750 trillion. This number now comes in handy. So let's take that number, let's times it by the current portfolio allocation into Bitcoin, and that is 0.003524. That gives us 2.639. This is trillions of dollars. And let's take the conservative growth that we saw in the allocation into gold, which is 3x. So let's take that and times it by 3. That gives us $7.92 trillion. This is the potential market cap of Bitcoin over the next decade, with a very conservative estimate based on it only having a similar type of trajectory for portfolio percentage growth like what we saw in gold. So what does this translate to in terms of Bitcoin price? If Bitcoin has a $7.92 trillion of market cap, the supply of Bitcoin over the next 10 years is going to be about 20 million coins. You take this divided by 20 million, that gives us about $395,000 per Bitcoin. This is the conservative case, just assuming Bitcoin only grows very slowly and doesn't even grow faster than the trajectory of gold. I say this is conservative because when you compare this to the projected market cap of gold, assuming gold continues to stay at 4.7% allocation of the total wealth in the world, very simple, we take the wealth projection of $750 trillion times it by 4.7%, that gives us the market cap projection for gold to be at $35 trillion by 2034. So this projection, you see how it's very conservative. We are still only assuming Bitcoin to be at less than 25% the market cap of gold in the next decade. Again, this is way different from what people say where Bitcoin has to reach the market cap parity with gold. I think that is actually a pretty far stretch. So then in order to have a $1 million per Bitcoin, what does that look like in terms of market cap comparison between Bitcoin and gold? Well, $1 million per Bitcoin at 20 million total coins just gives us $20 trillion. So you take 20 and you compare it by the projected market cap of gold coming in at 35 trillion. This means we only need to see Bitcoin reaching 57% of the market cap of gold in the next decade in order for Bitcoin to reach $1 million. Now you see where this number comes from. Bitcoin reaching $1 million seems like a huge number because people keep confusing what that actually means in terms of average portfolio allocation. All we are saying is that on average for the rich person's portfolio, they are allocating over 4.7% into gold on average, whereas their average allocation in Bitcoin is only at 0.35%. Over the next decade, we could see people allocating a larger percentage of their portfolio into Bitcoin, but none of them have to go all in for Bitcoin to reach $1 million. If we round up the numbers a bit, all we need to see over the next decade for Bitcoin to reach $1 million is this. For the average rich person's portfolio, for them to allocate 5% of their portfolio into gold and 3% of their portfolio into Bitcoin. As long as every single rich entity on average in the world, whether that's a billionaire, retirement fund, corporate treasury, central bank, whatever you have. As long as they do this portfolio allocation based on the total wealth growth in the world, Bitcoin will reach $1 million. We are not saying any single entity, any single type of entity need to allocate all of their treasury into Bitcoin. We're not even saying Bitcoin should be allocated at a higher portfolio percentage than gold. No, it only needs to be about 60% of the average allocation than gold. People still should believe more in gold because gold has existed for thousands of years. But a 5% versus a 3% allocation in these two assets doesn't seem far-fetched anymore. And this is the real potential that's actually quite achievable for Bitcoin in order for price to reflect so drastically to reach $1 million. This is my whole analysis on why Bitcoin can reach $1 million over the next decade. I am not here to FOMO you into thinking this can happen in the short term, because it won't. On the other hand, I also want to show you this is a totally realistic scenario based on buying demand. We just need 3% of the average wealthy portfolio to shift into Bitcoin over the next decade for it to reach $1 million. As we go into the 2025 bull market, things will get crazy. Keep this analysis in the back of your head so you see the bigger picture. Accumulate Bitcoin as it is the highest risk to reward investment to grow your wealth over the long term. Okay, that's it for today's content. If you are looking for a group to trade and invest with, join our community called the Coiners. We also have a special VIP program for pro traders. If you are a large trader with tons of experience and large volume, the Coiners and I will become your personal research team for technical analysis, fundamental analysis, exchanges and tools guide, on-chain degen stuff for meme coins and altcoins, whatever you need to help you succeed in this upcoming market. We are looking for a very select group of people to work with one-on-one. If this fits your profile, apply today on pro.thecoiners.io with the link in the description. Make sure to follow me on X at VirtualBacon0x for quick alpha that don't make it onto my videos. As always, thank you for watching and I'll see you on the next video.